Hello, welcome to Wednesday's ESPN FC Live. Mark Donaldson alongside Shaka Hislop. Today, Premier League chat, including Manchester United, Manchester City, and various other things, and also Champions League look ahead and a recap to last night. What has happened to Bayern? It was an excellent performance by Celtic, but just not enough at the Allianz Arena. But Shaq, let's start with Manchester United, and Spurs have beaten them now for the third time this season. You can add Ahmad and you can add Menu to the injury list. They're not really scoring goals, and they have to go to Goodison Park on Saturday. Where's the light at the end of the tunnel for United right now?
That May is 3 months away. I guess. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what else as a Manchester United fan you cling to, because let's be honest, as kind of impotent as Manchester United I've looked for some time, the only real game changer, consistent game changer within that dressing room has been Amad Diallo, and now he's up for the rest of the season. So you look at what's there, and you're left kind of scratching your head in frustration. I'm not sure where the difference is going to come. The one player of true quality in that current lineup, I guess you'd have to call it, would be Bruno Fernandes. But he's been a little bit inconsistent, and maybe you can blame the supporting cast for that. But whichever way, they're just no individuals that make a difference for them. So you're not sure who's going to be that difference.
It's difficult when you get a game on paper, because they've got 3 home games after this Everton game at Goodison, and they're normally, it's Man United, it's Old Trafford. It's like, okay, it's 3 points. How many are they going to score? But it doesn't work like that these days. So the league is finish as high as you can, and they're not going to get a European spot next season through the league. Now, there's still a Champions League spot up for grabs for the winners of the Europa League. And for some reason, usually just due to volume of cash, them and Spurs are the 2 favourites.
Yeah.
Be carrying my cash, doubt they'd be carrying yours. So next up for them, would you fancy Manchester United against any one of these possible 4 opponents? And we don't know who it is yet. Real Sociedad, Galatasaray, AZ Alkmaar, or Midtjylland?
Given what we've seen from Manchester United over the last couple of seasons, nobody holds any fear. And none of that 4 holds any fear in coming up against Manchester United, for all the reasons that we've just detailed about their lack of firepower, lack of true quality. Yes, Manchester United are still a big club. Old Trafford, I'm reluctant to say it's a difficult place to go, but they will get a big crowd. If they decide on the day, they can be noisy and maybe create somewhat of an atmosphere, but it just doesn't hold the kind of mystique or the fear that it once did as a football ground. So anybody coming to Manchester United right now think they can write history.
Amad Diallo's the top scorer, and he's hurt. He's got 6. Bruno's got 5. So it's a case of, where are the goals coming from? And look, there are some teams that 1 is enough because they can rely on their defense. Yeah. So A, where's the goals coming from? And B, is this a setup and a system that he swears by, Ruben Amorim? Does it work with the addition of only 1 kind of key player in the January transfer window to play at wing-back?
Well, you only have to look at the game at Spurs for, I think, all the answers you need for that. 1, yes, Bruno Amorim is going to stick to the system that he believes in. He's not going to adjust, but then saying that, he's not under the pressure of needing a result, given that, he was only appointed a couple of months ago. So he can kind of stick to his guns and how he sees fit, and knows that come next August, he will still be Manchester United manager, almost regardless of what happens between now and the end of May. Where the goals come from and their firepower, and teams only needing 1. Again, look at Spurs. Spurs scored 1. And while you can make the argument that Vicario on the day was Spurs man of the match, I thought he made the saves that you would expect him to. And while I was sitting there watching that game, and while, yes, maybe I'm biased, but I have a feeling I'm not alone, Vicario was Spurs' outstanding player. At no point I felt a goal is coming here, even when Manchester United pressured later on and Spurs kind of dropped deeper and deeper because they're protecting this 1-0 lead. I sat there thinking, yeah, there's a 1-0. maybe they could have scored, and we all know how this game works. Things just kind of at times come from nothing. But at no point did I sit there thinking, yeah, Manchester United are banging on the door here, and they're about to score.
Given the team,
sorry, Matt. I'll contrast that, and as I did on FC, because I think the same day or the next day was Liverpool Wolves. Liverpool had a 2-goal lead. Wolves scored, and Wolves came banging on the door. And I was watching that one and thought Wolves are going to score here any minute. And as we know, it turned out to be 2-1. I just made that point to contrast how kind of flat Manchester United were, and while again, you know that a goal can a lot of times come from absolutely nowhere. I just never felt it in the way that I did Wolves at Anfield.
I always think in life, problem identification is easy. Solutions to problems are a lot harder. And it's easy to sit here and kick Man United when they're down. But look, if you want to do that on FC or Dan or whoever, I think it's a case of, for any team, I mean, I've got no skin in the game here. I want to see if there are solutions available. And it's tough when you don't have a transfer window. So what are the solutions, and what's the best opportunity for Manchester United? Is it with the teams in and the teams already out, the FA Cup, where they've got Fulham next, or the Europa League, where they don't yet know their opponents?
I'm going to sit on the fence in this one, in that while yes, the big boys, so to speak, are out of the FA Cup, and I think when we were discussing this last, we almost had Newcastle as the favourites. I mean, Newcastle have had their stumbles of late. They've still been a pretty good season, but they've had their stumbles of late. But they kind of among the favourites to win the FA Cup. At the same time, the Europa League offers an opportunity for Manchester United, and yes, between them and Spurs, they're joint favourites, but I'm pretty sure that Lazio are still in that competition. Roma are still in that competition. I'm trying to think that there are a couple others in there that you just feel.
Athletic Club from Bilbao.
Athletic Club, there you go. That you feel right now are better than Manchester United, and I know it's a cup competition, and so it's again that can throw up as a surprise as much as any. So I'm a little bit on the fence in that one, because while again Manchester United themselves have played a part in big favourites going out to the FA Cup. I'm thinking about Arsenal here. I think this version of Manchester United, Diallo-less Manchester United, let's call it. Again, don't worry anybody.
It seems to be the case they play better against better teams. I mean, I know
because they have to sit back. Because they have to sit back. But again, that sitting back and having space for the likes of Amad Diallo to run into is one thing. Garnacho as being the most viable option. And I hold my hands up here. At the start of the season, I said if Manchester United was successful, they had to rely on Garnacho a lot more. But he has just failed to deliver. He's failed to deliver. And again, you saw that against Spurs.
I spoke about their next away game is at Everton. Then they've got 3 home games, including that FA Cup tie. And then they go to Arsenal. So let's chat a bit about the Gunners here, because we didn't know the answer. Who's going to be scoring the goals? Who's going to be the Arsenal goal hero? Who's going to be the striker or the false nine? And now it's simple. He comes off the bench, and Mikel Merino, who's a central midfielder, is the answer for one game. So do you start him in that position? And if you don't, because I felt sorry for Raheem Sterling. He's a shell of what he used to be. He's not the answer. So what do you do for Arsenal this weekend? They've got West Ham United, your former team.
Start Merino. Listen, and there's been a lot of discussion about this on the show as well. I think you have to start Merino because you don't have another option. Now, I was making the point maybe a month or so ago that I would have played Nwaneri through the middle. I wouldn't have played Kai Havertz. But then Bukayo Saka goes down, and maybe it's more than a month, but whatever. Bukayo Saka goes down, and Nwaneri has to play on that right-hand side, and you can't now shift him into the middle. He has a job to do out wide, so he has to play. So now you've got to find somebody else to come through the middle. Okay, the Kai Havertz is now out for the season. Raheem Sterling is due back probably end of March. I know there's been some reports more mid-March, but let's say end of March by the time he finds full fitness and is back to his best. And at that point, maybe you move 1 year up to the middle. Other than that, Arsenal have no option. Gabriel Jesus out for the season. Kai Havertz, we've already discussed. Who else is there? And I don't know. And so therefore, Mika Marino, given his impact the other day, as against Leicester, has to play. You have to try it. You have to try it.
I don't think there's that much difference between him and Kai Havertz, and that they're not a striker. And Havertz likes to come from deep. We saw Mika Marino scoring the extra time winner at the Euros for Spain. He didn't have a good time at Newcastle. When he was playing at Real Sociedad, he kind of played left of a kind of midfield, either a 2 or a 3. But every time he got the opportunities to get forward, he's certainly got an eye for goal. And he's clearly a finisher as well. Is there something, a potential, because we think Arsenal, we think 4-3-3. Is there maybe something to think that Marino could play, but maybe be in that kind of floating number 10, false 9 position? Is that something they could do?
Absolutely, because he's not going to play with his back to goal. He's not going to hold the play up and invite others on. So you have to adjust. And I think that's exactly what Arsenal and Mikel Arteta are now forced to do. Marino drops a little bit deeper, plays a little bit more, and they play a little bit more as a flatter front three, so to speak. And that may be the solution, because right now, Mark, as we said, I just don't think there's another option. I just don't know who else to turn to.
So I spoke when we're discussing Manchester United about trying to be glass half full, and let's continue that with Arsenal. Okay, nobody has conceded fewer goals in the Premier League, but only Manchester City and Liverpool have scored more goals. A side who've scored the third most goals, pretty much without a goal scorer. I mean, Gabriel Jesus isn't played much at all, and Kai Havertz is a false 9 if you want at best. Yeah. So they find a way. Now, we spoke about Manchester United and maybe only needing one if their defence is good. Arsenal have got that. So could we see a more pragmatic Arsenal between now and the end of the season?
Yes, absolutely. And you're right to point to their defence as being the kind of foundations of those successes, because 1-0 will do it. And as stingy a defence as they have, and while we question who plays up front as that out-and-out striker, they still pose a significant threat from set pieces. So it's there. They're not. Maybe the argument is they're not going to blow teams out of the water 4 and 5. But again, kind of given how good they are defensively, they only need 1 or 2 to see games out, and they can find that. They can find that. They while again you want to contrast with Manchester United, they have quality on the park. Maybe not in that centre forward position, but Arsenal, even with their injuries, have quality on the park.
Prior to the weekend, Arsenal had scored the second most goals in the Premier League. And then Manchester City hit 4 against your former club, Newcastle. And they looked good. Marmoush was outstanding. And he's a big talent. He showed that in the Bundesliga. He might be the focal point now with Erling Haaland potentially missing for some weeks because of a knee problem. Still waiting on an update there from Pep Guardiola. What about City going forward? Because they weren't back to their best against Newcastle, but they had that swagger we've not seen for a while.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect description to it, Mark. They did have a little bit of swagger, and I love Marmoush playing up front on that left-hand side alongside Erling Haaland. And you're right, we'll have to wait to see how that or his fitness. But I thought it worked wonderfully well, and I thought Manchester City looked really good against Newcastle the other day. You're absolutely right. Played with a confidence that we hadn't seen for some time. I'm a little bit reluctant to go all in because we're only 2 or 3 weeks removed from Manchester City taking advantage of poor Leicester City and Pep Guardiola announcing that Manchester City were back, and then they are quickly humbled. And while I thought this was a better performance than against Newcastle, and we certainly saw against Leicester, and one absolutely that you can build on, I'm also maybe reminded and had my fair share of nightmares of Newcastle getting absolutely humiliated at home to Bournemouth. So you know that Newcastle can be very Jekyll and Hyde, or certainly have been over the last few weeks. So now you have an opportunity to go and prove it to prove or to kind of refine that swagger or continue with that swagger against Real Madrid. Let's see if you can. But for all the criticism around Manchester City, you can only work your way back to your previous best one game at a time. And the Newcastle game was a very good game in that regard.
Well, he's in the squad. Whether he plays against Real Madrid remains to be seen. Thankfully, it looks like he's avoided serious injury on his knee, Erling Haaland. But the point is the same with regards to Marmouth.
And to that point around Erling Haaland, going down when nobody's around you is always worrying.
What did you make of Nico Gonzalez's performance against Newcastle? Signed from Porto, former Barca player. Rodri light, because everyone needs Rodri and they don't have him. So it's like he's the next X, Y, or Z. Thought he looked good.
I thought City looked very good in midfield, and you have to pay them credit. When the starting lineups came up and City had Nico Gonzalez and Gundogan in midfield, and Newcastle had out Guimaraes, Murphy, and I'm trying to think who the third defensive midfielder was. I thought Newcastle are going to dominate this midfield here, and it couldn't have been. It couldn't have been any more different. And while I absolutely will praise Gundogan for his quality, you've seen that from day one at Manchester City. This isn't that Gundogan. He doesn't have those legs. So when those lineups came out, I thought, and let's be honest, we hadn't seen much of Nico Gonzalez, given his early injury and having to come off against Leyton Orient. I thought Newcastle are going to completely dominate the middle of the park. So give both Gundogan and, to your question, Mark, Nico Gonzalez their credit, because I couldn't have been more wrong in that pre-game feeling.
City right now 16 points behind leaders Liverpool. They're unlikely to catch them. Liverpool in action at Villa today. Before we start on to our Champions League chat, what's your prediction for that one at Villa Park this afternoon?
I think Liverpool continue to get it done. I don't think it's going to be overly convincing. You could probably say that Villa have at times not been overly convincing. I think Villa have saved the worst of their performances to post Champions League dates. This isn't one of those, but still, Liverpool haven't been as swashbuckling as they were early in the season, but they somehow managed to get the job done, managed to get results, or for the most part. And yes, again, against Wolves at Anfield, it was far too nervy. They got the job done, as we had been discussing earlier. As I sat and watched the last half hour of that, I couldn't be more convinced that Wolves I would have lost my mortgage. Wolves was going to equalise at some point here. And Aston Villa, without question, are a better team than Wolves. But still, Liverpool have a way of getting a result. And I think they do so again. I'm going to go, if I may offer a bold prediction, and I am not going to be putting my mortgage on this, so fair play to you if you decide to do it yourself. I'm going to go 2-1 Liverpool.
Okay. The reason this game is taking place today, it's meant to be round 29, which would be the middle of March. It's because of the League Cup final. And Newcastle, who they'll play Liverpool in the final, they don't play Crystal Palace in that round of fixtures until April. So we've gone from Liverpool with a game in hand to now playing a game more after this game against Villa. That's the housekeeping. Champions League, Bayern Munich. Were they that bad or were Celtic that good? And how worried are you, despite the fact they found a way through for Vincent Kompany?
They found a way through, so all you can ask is to be in the next round. I nearly said be in the hat for the next round, but the draw's already made. So they through to the next round, but there was nothing convincing. I mean, I thought this would have been an absolute schooling for Celtic. And it was anything but, albeit a game of two halves. I thought Celtic were absolutely the better of the two in the first half. You saw Bayern's kind of fumblings is the perfect description for it when you see Celtic's goal. Um, and then up front, and while Kane hit the crossbar in the first half, the opportunities were so limited that it was alarming. And granted, it got better in the second half. It couldn't get any worse. Let's be honest. I thought Bayern did a far better job of pressing Celtic high up the park and were better for it. But don't grab that equalizer till very late on. And it just shows, for as much as we think of Bayern Munich, certainly in this competition, as we do in the Bundesliga, and the Leverkusen game kind of set the scene for that, they are a shadow of their former selves. I think the one thing you will have to see in their kind of benefit is that you could say the same about so many of the other European giants, that they are a shadow of their former selves. Liverpool have been probably the best of the bunch. We've been discussing them. They've not been swashbuckling, but getting results. Barcelona finished second in the Champions League table, but we've seen them have major stumbles. So as of right now, if you're one of the usual suspects, all you could do is ask to be in the next round, hope that you find that form before anybody else, and that things and take it from there. And at least Bayern Munich are in the next round.
There is a little draw in one of those tiny little hats, because there's only two teams that they could face, Leverkusen or Atletico Madrid. Now, last season, right, they're 8 points clear of Leverkusen right now. Still 8 after the goalless draw at the weekend, where you could argue they were maybe fortunate to get a point.
Yeah.
That's not going to hold any fear for either. I mean, Atletico Madrid already through Bayer Leverkusen, playing them again. They're not going to be feared or fearing a game against Bayern Munich, are they?
No, they're not. Should have won. Should have won that game on the weekend. Tella had some glorious chances. A little bit unlucky, I'll be honest with you. That could have gone so differently for them. But neither of those teams hold any fear of Bayern Munich, given what we saw. The only concern is that all of a sudden things turn around in the next few weeks in a way that nobody's expecting. But what we've seen so far, and not just over the last week, what we've seen pretty much consistently all season from Bayern Munich, neither of those two teams fear Bayern.
What kind of season would it be for Bayern? And I'm going to jump ahead here. They got knocked out of the DFB Pokal by Bayer Leverkusen. They'll probably not win the Champions League, although never say never. But for this argument, they're not going to win the Champions League. They're already out the German Cup, but they're going to win the Bundesliga.
They're going to win the league. They'll win the league.
So what kind of season is that for Vincent Kompany? Because they didn't win the league last season, but that was lightning in a bottle from Bayer Leverkusen. What kind of season would it be if they won the league and that was it?
Good season. I think you take that. You take that because of last season, because you win nothing last season, and all the turmoil that came with that. So winning the league, which is still everybody's bread and butter, and I know we're talking about European giants, and there's an expectation to go very deep in the Champions League, but winning the league is the bread and butter. And when you're coming off the back of a season in which you won absolutely nothing, you take your bread and butter. So you call that a good season, one to build on, knowing full well that there's still a lot of work to be done, though.
Does Vincent Kompany need a big win for these conversations to no longer take place or to lessen, given the fact that in bigger games at Feyenoord he lost 3-0 and having won 2-1 in Glasgow in the first leg against Celtic, couldn't beat them at home in the second leg? Does he need a big win to keep people quiet?
Vincent Kompany needs to win the league and then build from there. That's his need. No, a good win against a big club, a big win, as you put it, would be certainly more than welcome, and keep some of the noise down, or maybe extend some of that extended honeymoon, let's call it, at the start of next season, where all eyes will again be on Kompany and the job that he's doing and the results that he's getting and where Bayern are. But right now he needs to win. Physical company cannot throw away an 8-point lead at this stage of the season. Win the league, take it from there. Anything else that comes is icing on the cake.
I've been slightly surprised after a first leg at the Etihad when Manchester City, for long spells, despite the fact they weren't great at times, looked like they might be taking a lead to the Bernabeu, and then it was a draw, and then it was a defeat after Ederson had a brain fart and did some stupid things. A lot of people over here in the United States, whether it's been ESPN FC and other talk shows or online or radio, they basically said, look, City have got no chance here. And even Craig Burley at the weekend said maybe I was, when I said that, I was a wee bit too kind of harsh on them. And Pep Guardiola says we've only got 1% chance. Real Madrid are deservedly favourites, will probably go through, but City are still a live threat in this game today, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely, because of what you saw against Newcastle. And I know, as I said before, that's one result. You build on that. Because of the very inconsistencies of Real Madrid that we've seen from so many others, the Bayerns and the Manchester Cities themselves. They've been inconsistent as well. They have a lot of issues in the back, and I know they coped well enough, certainly, in that first leg, but it's a makeshift back four. And so there very well may be opportunities. Now, it's up to Manchester City to take them. But yes, no question, Real Madrid are favourites here. But, you know, this is a long way from decided.
You look at the games, I'm just checking back at kind of October, November time, and normally they've been pretty good at home, but they got spanked by Barcelona 4-0. And then AC Milan went there and played them really well and came away with a 3-1 win. Is it all about City getting the first goal? Is the tie over if Real Madrid score this first goal, or is there still a way back given the aggregate score?
I think City's issues have been later on in games. As you saw in the first leg, defending narrow leads, they just look. See, the Real Madrid game kind of summed it up, or the last 10, 15 minutes, devoid of confidence that they can last a full 90, that they can withstand the assault of a good team with good players and a good coach, even one that's coping with any number of injuries and adjustments themselves. They just don't seem to have that confidence. Now, it was not an issue against Newcastle because the lead was so large, but I want to see if Manchester City can defend in narrow lead, because I don't think, regardless, as much as I say Real Madrid are favourites, but Manchester City still have a chance, I don't think it's going to be 3 or 4 in the last 10 minutes so City can be comfortable. If City are going to win this, I think it's going to be narrow, and I think it's hugely dependent on their own confidence in defending a narrow lead.
I know you guys have spoken about this on ESPN FC, but specifically, what has been City's issue in the last 15 minutes of games this season? They've conceded a lot of goals. Well, yeah, none more so than the Feyenoord game. They're 3-0 up. How can a team that basically has won the last 4 Premier Leagues suffer from a lack of confidence? Is part of it they might be leggy because they're a little bit older and some of the players don't have what they used to have?
I think some of that as well, but a lot of it's just down to confidence. And when you find yourself in that run, when you find yourself spiraling that way, and I've been there, where you can see 1, 2, 3 goals in the last 15 or 20 minutes of a game, that becomes really hard to protect or work your way out of. Because what you find is in the last 15 minutes of a game, because you have that experience, that feeling in the back of your mind, you start to drop deeper and deeper and invite the pressure on. The other team senses it, and they continue to move forward in ways that they may not ordinarily. And there's a sense of worry on, in this case, City in defending narrow leads, and a sense of belief in teams coming there and recognizing and sensing that blood in the water. It's the exact other side of the same coin of Leverkusen last season. That late on in games, there was just this belief in Leverkusen that we're going to score. And there was a belief in the opponent that Leverkusen were going to score. And when those two things come together, inevitably, 94th minute, somebody's going to pop up, probably Florian Wirtz, and bang the ball in the back of the net. No, this is the exact same thing in reverse for Manchester City.
I saw a wee story about Florian Wirtz being identified by Pep Guardiola as a Kevin De Bruyne replacement next season. But that's for another day, Shaka, because
that's for another day.
The horn has gone. The klaxon has sounded for today's ESPN FC Live. I know you love talking about football.
What's a klaxon? I don't even know what's a klaxon.
It's like a horn. You know, when there's a bad when the weather turns bad at golf and you hear their klaxon.
Oh, that's so a klaxon is a horn for fancy people.
KLAX. I was like you, and once I heard it, I was like, "What's a klaxon?" That's a klaxon. For someone that's got the education you have, it's very rare. I can teach you anything.
I skipped the horn class.
Yes, well, let's not skip the prediction class. What you got? Real Madrid, Man City.
Real Madrid to go through 2-1 on the night.
Yeah, I don't suggest that there might be many clean sheets today with teams having to go for it. Thank you, Shaka. It might be an afternoon or an evening, whatever you're watching. You might need a second device with Aston Villa Liverpool at 2:30 Eastern today, 11:30 out west, and that's followed at 3 o'clock Eastern by the Champions League round of 16 tie, or whatever they are, the playoff knockout.
Something.
So that's going on. Full reaction to both at ESPN FC. That klaxon's in my head's going, and it says to tell you, for me, to say goodbye. Goodbye.